This is my snap review of Dune. That movie was absolutely terrible. I have seen it before, but it was years ago when I was younger, and my recollection of my earlier viewing was that I thought it was pretty cool, but now, although there's still some things about it that are a little bit cool, it's actually just a really terrible movie, and it's interesting to think about what makes it so terrible. I think that to sum up what really makes it terrible is just lowest common denominator thinking on the part of the people who had final cut. I think perhaps David Lynch conceived, because I know that he originally conceived a longer version of the movie. I heard that draft of the script they started shooting from would have ended up being like over a 4-hour movie, and then the final, what had been shot and cut together by David Lynch, was 3 hours, and then Dino De Laurentiis insisted that it be a tight 2 hours and like a kind of a blockbuster format. And anything where David Lynch had relied on the intelligence of the audience to piece things together and follow along the story was totally obliterated. Everything was written in very, very clumsy, fast, terribly paced exposition. A bunch of voiceover was added to the movie, which is weird because sometimes in the voiceover they're saying redundant things with what is being exposited out loud, and the overall effect is just very, very cheesy and cheap and kind of insulting to watch. The score by Toto, the movie has a feel of not even being of its own time. Like, not only from 2020 am I looking back like, wow, movies were cheesy looking in 1984, because I'm actually not really bothered if a movie just looks of its time. I just accept the framework of its time. But this movie looked like made in 1984, but kind of had a lot of the aesthetic and logic of movies that were made like in the 50s and 60s. Kind of, I'm thinking about like some Jules Verne like type, like a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and I think there's a Time Machine movie from that time. And yeah, it just seems like it was already out of date in 1984. And then the ways in which it is 80s, which is like Sting, and also Toto doing the music. The score sounds really, really, well, very bland and not very inspired, and you can tell that the guys in Toto thought it was badass, and they're doing like these squealing electric guitar notes over orchestra music. Awful. Kyle MacLachlan doesn't give a good performance. I actually like Kyle MacLachlan in Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, but this role, not good. He can play a hometown boy, he can't play a nobility, and he's trying to do a kind of a halfway British accent in the movie, and it's bad. And anything in the movie that does seem like it's about to be badass gets ruined. Like, for example, towards the end, when the baby sister is talking, and they have, for about one shot, they get a good illusion of this little kid actor, probably a 3 or 4-year-old, mouthing the lines, and then an adult woman's voice coming out, and it's very eerie. For a second, you're like, oh shit, baby that talks like a grown-up, and it's like commanding the attention of all the grown-up people in the room. But then on the very next shot, the child actor gave a kind of a goofy take where she looks like a little kid, and I don't know, they didn't notice that, they didn't care enough to fix it, they couldn't get a better take out of the child actor, I don't know. So then it just looks like a baby with a voiceover. That happens over and over and over again. The most effective parts of the movie is David Lynch doing his best thing, which is kind of directing the gruesome, and his imaginings of the bad guys and their gross deprivations and their cruel tortures is, of course, where he succeeds the best. Some things in the movie look pretty okay, and are some illusions are well made, and some visual effects look good, but pretty uneven on that count as well. It's funny to know that David Lynch was offered to direct Return of the Jedi. It's funny to think what kind of movie might have happened if David Lynch had directed Return of the Jedi. He had the good sense not to. And it's clear he really cared about Dune. He's obviously an artist that works on inspiration, and he clearly wanted to tell this story. He wrote 5 drafts of the script, actually 7 drafts by the time all was said and done. Just wanted to add one more thing on this analysis, which was that the theme of the story itself is, I think, in the original Frank Herbert book and in the movie, is a kind of an allegory about oil. And it's just really interesting to look back and see the preoccupation of an earlier time with what was then becoming to be realized as a major global problem, the reliance of the entire economy on one single product, non-renewable product. And many of those same problems are still with us, although that's not what's most occupying everybody's consciousness right now. So there is my snap review of Dune.